Welcome to the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. We're here with Waldo. Where in the world is Waldo? This week, or a week or so ago, I don't know exactly when it was, Jimmy Kimmel put a man out on the street. He started asking young adults as they walked by if they could identify places in the world. Donald Trump is trotting around the globe for his meetings with Queen Elizabeth, the NATO, Russian premier. And so he wondered, Kimmel did, if Americans could find any of these countries on a map. He said, we came up with a test. The test was very simple. We went out on the street. We asked people passing by to name a country on a map. That's it. He said the results were impressive. In the first attempt, the nation or the country to be identified was South Africa. The first participant circled what she thought was South Africa. It was actually Bolivia. That's over in South America. Another attempt was point to the country of Asia. The person pointed to Russia. He also thought that Russia was the country of Asia. Another participant technically pointed to the right area. She was reminded that Africa is a continent. When she asked if she could name any countries in Africa, she said no. Who knows stuff like that? She appeared to be in her mid-20s or later. The fourth participant was pretty sure she was pointing to Greenland or Iceland, only to be told that she was actually pointing at Alaska. And America? Participant number one was back to redeem herself. The host asked if she could point to America. She said, I would say this big one, as she circled Russia. But I'm probably wrong. She went on to mislabel Australia as Europe and South America as Africa, and failed to list any country in South America. The sad part, according to the participant, was that she graduated from high school and college. The sixth participant was fairly confident that Honduras was located somewhere in South America, saying, shouldn't this be taught in school? Duh. And finally, a young kid, looked to be about 14 or 15, was able to successfully label numerous countries in South America. He didn't have any problem at all. He was probably homeschooled. Most of the participants struggled. Geographic literacy is rare in the United States. According to the New York Times survey, only 36% of Americans could find North Korea on a map. Now, the young man saved the day with Kimmel's test, but only 17% of young Americans could find Afghanistan on a map in 2002. That, according to National Geographic. Fewer than 15% could find Iraq or Israel. Kimmel found the test hilarious. He thought it was an example of American geographic illiteracy, saying, well, you didn't believe that children are our future before? Now you do. It's a little convoluted. A website calling itself creditdonkey.com consulted a number of sources to generate what they consider the most accurate picture possible of just how widespread illiteracy is in the United States. Approximately 14% of American adult population, that's 32 million people, are illiterate. Among developed nations, America ranks 16th in literacy. Approximately 38% of men, 33% of women read at the lowest proficiency levels. About 30 million adults are comprehending at the 10-year-old level. That's 5th grade. 63 million people read between 6th and 8th grade levels. Only 11% of men and 12% of women are considered proficient readers. Bakersfield, California is the least literate city in the United States. Washington, D.C. ranks as the most literate city at 53% of adults holding a college degree. Less than 20% of U.S. high school graduates develop reading proficiency by the time they graduate. Single-parent homes place children at risk for reading deficiency, scoring 45 points lower on literacy reading assignments. Reading to children boosts literacy by 20%. It's estimated that 77% of children who are read to are more likely to attempt reading on their own, as opposed to 57% who do not have a story time at home. 70% of our middle school students claim to read 10 books or more a year. 46% of high school students make the same claim. Studies show that if reading skills are not formed during a child's early years, the odds of dropping out down the road increase significantly. If a child is not reading successfully by third grade, the odds of that child not finishing high school is 4 times higher. 21% of girls with below average reading skills had a child in their early teens, compared to only 5% who were above average readers. 60% of students who struggle with reading in the 4th grade run afoul of the law at some point in their life. 85% of juvenile offenders who come in contact with juvenile court are considered functionally illiterate. Adult prisoners, 70% of the men and female inmates score at the lowest proficiency level for reading. Prison inmates who take advantages of education programs in prison are far less likely to return once released. Recidivism rates for those in literacy programs in one study dropped from 60 to 27%. As many as 75% of welfare recipients struggle to read even the simplest texts. That portion of the population which cannot read costs the nation $225 billion every year. The same demographic costs the healthcare system $100 billion a year. In terms of earning power, women who have low literacy skills are likely to earn $300 a week less than their male counterparts, who earn $650 or more a week. What's our problem? It's a simple answer. Our educational philosophy. The fact is, the majority of children want to read. If you put it in front of them, if you stimulate it, if you suggest it, they jump to it. And parents who don't encourage, don't stimulate, don't support this particular desire are guilty of child abuse. Why? Well, they're contributing to that child's inability to achieve academically, and we see where that leads. In this economy, that's a monetary death sentence. The fact is, in our state and now federal education systems, we don't want children to learn how to read, at least not easily or quickly. You see, we used to employ something called sight reading to teach first graders how to read. In the early days of this nation, children were taught to read learning the sounds of the letter, phonetics, not sight reading. McGuffey readers were used as textbooks in American schools from the mid-1800s until the 1940s. Horace Mann is credited with being the father of American public education. He instituted something he called common schooling in 1834. He saw this as a social reform effort, bringing all classes of people closer together by creating opportunity and promoting citizenship. These rudimentary schools educated some of our most prominent Americans. But in the 1940s, 1950s, we saw it differently, and we switched. We went from phonetics to sight reading. See Jane run. See Spot jump. Why? Well, because in the late 1930s An atheistic, humanistic psychiatrist took over our educational system. His name was John Dewey, and he is now considered the father of modern American education. Who is this guy? He's a philosopher psychiatrist, an academic professor at university. He was also a committed universalist and humanist. One of his more infamous quotes was, quote, "Teaching school children to read was a perversion, and high literacy rates bred the sustaining force behind individualism, which in his view was a bad thing." And he said the curriculum should be designed to promote mental health as an instrument for social progress and as a means of altering culture. 1961. He also said the plea for the predominance of learning to read in early school life because of the great importance attached to literature seems to be a perversion. John Dewey, father of modern American education, said these things in a publication he called The Primary Education Fetish. When you see teachers creating classroom environments which capitalize on a child's interest at the moment, you're watching a pure Dewey disciple. The child is the best indicator of what needs to be taught at that moment. Education should aim at destroying free will. That's a quote. That's one of the stated goals of this movement. After 80 years of this sort of indoctrination, beginning slowly, carefully structuring with goals known only to the elite within the educational system, we have now come to the goal, which is a citizenry without an objective moral compass, and with skills only in the areas of their interest and ability. A culture that accepts what their leaders say because they're the experts in their field, right? And unless you've been to university, unless you are accepted by the elite movers and shakers of this society, what do you know? Can you see it? Politics, education, religion. It doesn't show up as much in disciplines which are based on absolute values and or principles like economics or the scientific world. And this is why a man like Donald Trump can be as successful as he wants and still not be acceptable to those who know better. It's not what works that matters, but what is morally, politically, socially, academically acceptable. These people have succeeded in creating an elite class. They know everything, you don't. So sit down and be quiet. Only Trump won't do that. His education has been in a hard science, economics, not in the classroom, on the street. His experience has made him both wealthy and wise. Wise in the way people act and respond. He instinctively knows what's the right thing to do if he wants to move that person or that event. And nobody understands him. And he has made the best TV show we've seen in years.